What's up, Wigglers, and welcome to another video. In today's video, I have something I have been wanting to talk about. Upcoming, I don't know how long this is going to take because everything is a bit of a nightmare for me, but upcoming, I desperately want to make a video about the Benchmade 42. I think that it is a subject that has been a big deal in the balisong community for a long time, and rightfully so. I would say that this specific balisong is one of the reasons that we have the balisong community as it is today. I think from a historical impact perspective, this balisong is incredibly important. And so I want to talk about it for that reason, but I also want to sort of understand the magic of the Benchmade 42. Why is the Benchmade 42 a historical balisong? You know, what about it made everything change? And what about it is so good nowadays that people are willing to pay insane amounts of money for one of these things? And I think I have a few answers to those questions, and I think it's going to require a bit of writing on my part to really get that across in a way that is entertaining and makes sense, and isn't too much of a yap fest like a video like this will be. And yeah, I think one of the things that's really astounded me about the Benchmade 42 is I've spent more and more time with it as I've had it in my collection. I've really enjoyed owning this specific Benchmade 42. This is a T-latch variant. I would love to have a spring latch variant as well, so I can really dive into the differences between them. And I think I'm going to reach out to the community and see if people have a Springer Benchmade 42 that I could either purchase from them or borrow from them for this upcoming Benchmade 42 video, just because I think it'd be really good to have both models and talk about them. But also, I don't have the money to really afford a Benchmade 42 Springer for the price that I think most people would want to sell it to me, so I might just borrow it. So if you have one either for sale at a price that is, please God, somewhat reasonable, or you're willing to let me borrow it for a bit so that I can make a video about it, I'd really appreciate that. But anyways, let's talk about the Benchmade 42. Why is this thing so intriguing? I think there's a lot of stuff behind that, but I think one of the things about the Benchmade 42 that is just so interesting to me is that I've thought for a long time I would love to sort of recapture the magic of the Benchmade 42. The Benchmade 42 was a revolutionary balisong for a lot of reasons, and I would love if there was a modern version of the Benchmade 42. It's something I've said plenty of times. And now I'm starting to think that after spending more and more time with it, I don't know if that can exist. I don't know if a modern version of the Benchmade 42 is actually possible. And what I mean by that is that it kind of does already exist. And also, I want to be clear, this doesn't mean I'm not going to try. I might still try collaborating with people and create something that to me has the magic experience of the Benchmade 42. But it won't be the same at the end of the day, and the main reason for that is that the Benchmade 42 has to be bad. It has to be bad. And what I mean by that is the tune. The tune of the Benchmade 42 has to be a bad, jangly experience that doesn't feel good to hold. It has to do this. You hear that? It has to do that. Why? Might be the question you're asking. Why does the Benchmade 42 have to be bad to be the Benchmade 42? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but the main one is that it just genuinely feels wrong and does not give you that same magical, perfect flipping, loose experience, this very forgiving, very open, very quick, very responsive, really nice experience. And then on top of that, because you have all of these things, you have this wonderful, nice, flowy experience. It's light, it's fast, it's perfectly balanced. But on top of all of those things, you don't have to give a shit about it. at least when these were first released, you did not have to care about your Benchmade 42. These cost somewhere in the neighborhood of like $120. I think new, which would maybe make them somewhere around $200 or $250 nowadays, and that's just a full-on guess, but I'm pretty sure somewhere in the neighborhood of $200, $250 is about what these cost, and if you adjust for inflation. And because of that, that meant that this was, all things considered, a relatively cheap balisong. Like, this is a titanium balisong that was pretty cheap, and you don't need to do anything with it. It is completely no nonsense. This is the throw it in your pocket and go around and do whatever you want and flip wherever you want over concrete and enjoy yourself and make stuff happen and make the magic happen. Notice that out of all of the balisongs that I've been flipping in the past few videos, this is the one that I'm dropping the least somehow. And it's because it just listens to me, even though it objectively shouldn't in many ways. Uh-oh, there's an emergency. It really shouldn't. There's no bushings. There's no, it shouldn't have free swinging stuff. It should be all tight and weird and gloopy, and it should be having handle slap that's causing blade rub, that's holding it in certain positions and making it really hard to flip, and yet it isn't. Because, actually, it's loose and jangly, and it doesn't have any lube in it, because if you add lube to this, it makes it worse. Lubing the Benchmade 42 makes it worse. It's crazy. Taking care of this thing in almost any way, it seems to make it worse. As a matter of fact, what I like about the Benchmade 42, one of the things that makes it such a no-nonsense, just stick it in your pocket and go somewhere, is that the pivots are force fit inside of here. And that's something that I think people have been for a while like, oh, why don't we, we should have pivots that kind of interlock with the back so that you don't need to worry about Loctite, which is a great idea in theory, but in practice it actually makes the overall balisong experience substantially worse. By having pivots that are affixed in any way to the handle, you sort of lock in a certain orientation that the pivots are going to have to be. And if the machining of the pivots and the machining of the handle are ever so slightly off, which they always will be in some tiny, tiny way, you're going to make your tune worse and harder to achieve. And so on modern balisongs, Maxace is maybe the company that I've seen do this the most, where they create a shape on the bottom of the pivot, and that shape interlocks with something to do with the handles and makes it where you don't need Loctite. And there are ways to achieve that that won't really affect the tune of the balisong at the end of the day, but this basically what's happened here is that these pivots literally have ridges that were then hammered into place inside of the titanium. They push against the titanium. That is the worst way to implement that if you're going to care about the tune. But we don't care about the tune. The Benchmade 42, as I said, has to have a bad tune to flip as good as it does. Therefore, it's good that I never have to touch it. These screws could literally fall out, and this thing would continue to flip incredibly well. Assassin Flown is a great example of that. He flips with his Benchmade 47, I think it's a T-latch variant Benchmade 47, that literally oftentimes does not have screws in it at all. And I love that. I love to see it. It is so interesting to me. The Benchmade 42 was a flash in the pan kind of thing, and I think the only thing that could actually replace for the community something to the experience level of the Benchmade 42 would basically be, and I have considered trying to design this, and so if you think that this is actually a good idea, I guess let me know in the comments, because otherwise I have plans to work on a titanium balisong with a company. I'm not going to divulge who yet, so you can think about that in the comments. That might be fun. But I want to create a titanium balisong with a company. I'm thinking of going with channel titanium and trying to make it light and fast and nimble like the Benchmade 42. But the thing I realized a bit ago was trying to make something that's like the Benchmade 42, it's already been done. The Tsunami is very close to the Benchmade 42 in experience. The Tsunami is a really incredible flipper that is light and fast and nimble like the Benchmade 42, but it is not a Benchmade 42 in any way, shape, or form, and that's because it has too good of a tune, which is so funny to me. And so even if I make a titanium balisong that is inspired by the Benchmade 42, it won't achieve what this is. The only way to achieve what this actually is to make a balisong that uses the cheapest, not the cheapest titanium, but like these were cast, these were not machined. You could make these handles so quickly because they were literally pouring molten titanium into a mold, and that's how they were creating these handles. These handles are not machined, and the amount of time that it takes to cast handles versus machining them is just night and day. So it's much cheaper already in terms of that production process. But also, molding handles means that they have terrible tolerances. You can't tune the, I mean you can, but you can't tune these, and you really shouldn't tune these. Sorry. Anyways, the only thing that could replace it really is something that is cheap in the neighborhood of like $150 to $200 and is terrible in a lot of ways. It needs to have relatively bad blade steel like D2. Now, D2 is not bad, but it's just, you know, a lower, it's not nearly the same as like S30V or whatever. So like D2 and I mean, even 440C, I don't care. If it's cheap enough, as long as it's cheap and good enough that it'll hold up. It doesn't need to hold an edge because most people don't care about it really holding an edge. It just needs to open boxes. And then it needs to have solid titanium, cast preferably, but if it can have machined handles and still be a good price, then that's fine. And then it needs to have press fit barrels. Okay, press fit, not ones that like interlock with the handle, but literally press fit, because if it can't operate with no screws in it at all, then it's not the same. It won't give the same level of experience. And it needs to be cheap, because what that would do is, at least in my opinion, it would create something for the community that would be like, hey, here it is. This is actually what the Benchmade 42's magic was. The magic was specifically that it was cheap and reliable and good. Those three things. And those three things are incredibly hard to come by. And you have to leave out something else, right? You can't, as people have said, you can have it cheap, you can have it built well, and you can have it be good. You need to pick two of those things. It can be cheap and good, but it can't be built well, or it can be built well and good, but it can't be cheap, right? This is a perfect example of that. If we're gonna make it cheap and good and reliable, it can't be built well. It can't have an insane tune. But as I have said, that literally makes it better in some ways. But I think right now there's a issue with the community where, and I mean, this has been a thing for a long time, and I certainly have maybe done my fair share of contributing to it, but the idea of a tune mattering so much, whether or not a balisong has tap or play or slap, I gotta say, having a Benchmade 42 and experiencing how good it can be has really kind of knocked that out of me. And that's not to say that I'm okay with all of my balisongs having slap. For instance, my Tsunami, I want that thing to be as tuned as possible. I want it to be perfect in terms of its tuning. And that's just because, for me, that is part of the experience of the Tsunami. The Tsunami is basically a balisong that flips this good, that also is perfect in other ways. But it's not cheap. This, at least at the time, it's not cheap anymore, but if it was cheap, this experience, I think, for the entire community could be something really cool. So anyways, yeah, I don't know, what do you think? If I did collaborate on a balisong with a company that was going to be a titanium balisong, would you rather see something that was, you know, well made, and has incredible tolerances and flips, you know, really good, and has like really well tuned bushings and all of that good stuff, and a really sick design, for somewhere in the neighborhood of like 350-ish bucks, or more? Or would you rather see something that is jangly and kind of bad, but maybe around $200? I don't know. I would really be interested to see what people think about that. If you think one way or the other, definitely let me know. But yeah, anyways, that's all I have for y'all today. Just wanted to rant a little bit about the Benchmade 42 and also talk about, yeah, I have a video about the Benchmade 42 upcoming. It's just, you know, all of this production process is incredibly slow for me at all times, so there's no telling when that's going to release, but wanted to talk a little bit about it, get some of my opinions out there, why I think the Benchmade 42 is so special and unique, and why the magic has not been recaptured, even though we have made knives that do simulate this exact experience. And yet, this is still above and beyond its own thing. Why is that? I genuinely believe part of the reason is how bad it is. So, yeah. Anyways, I'll see y'all later. Peace.